Oh, I look very shiny looking when it comes to like using the metal power-up, or in this case, in this matter though, metal Mario suit, if you will. But still looks very glossy looking, especially we're now on to the nice sunny day as it goes by, but on the forms of the video game industry. So, hey, you know, you probably get the idea for that. So, hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I am Mario here once again, and I'm back for some more yet again for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Super Mario Odyssey for the Nintendo Switch, specifically Luigi's Blue World mode. So, last time we have managed to able to completely done with, specifically the Cascade Kingdom's Luigi's Bloom World, and today for this video is the fact that we're going to be moving on to the next kingdom in Luigi's Bloom World, and that is the forms of Cascade Kingdom. So, unfortunately for this point in onwards is the fact that this will be the last time we're going to be seeing Cascade Kingdom for a very long while, until when it gets to the point, well, unless you played the Nintendo Switch version of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, mind you, that you at least managed to able to play Cascade level during one of those levels in the Switch version / the 3DS version. So, I would able to actually do a hide-in mode first to start off with, but unfortunately though, I keep on pressing the A button multiple times, so that's why I can able to do the fight-it mode instead. So, oh well though, bigger cells can't be choosers I suppose, but even way though, let's just get this thing started. So, yeah, today's day is the forms of, I would say today is the 27th of November today in 2019, and we're getting pretty close towards at the very end of November for 2019, so naturally speaking, that we're almost there to December, the final month for not only 2019, but also the final month for 2010's era, so even then, I can't believe it's been so shocking at this point, and yeah, that's as far as I can say this considered. So, you know, no idea why the loading times might take a while to able to load, specifically in this kingdom, or we've managed to able to go and load it, however though, so at least we managed to got that. So, yeah, because at this point in time is that my Wi-Fi managed to able to get a lot of issues recently, so hopefully by that time, until whenever we move on to the next kingdom, which should be the Sand Kingdom, I should expect to able to fix a lot of, like, internet connections here and there, so hopefully things will check out here. So anyways, let's go ahead and use the chain jump to pull it back up, and then let go in the process, so that way we can get ourselves, of course, the next balloon. So, yeah, you probably get the idea for that. So, there's one thing I totally forgot to mention about this, and I think we'll probably mention more on that during the forms of the majority of this Let's Play for the likes of Super Mario Odyssey, where it comes to Luigi's Blue World, is that I think we managed to actually get ourselves a little bit of a discussion to talk about, and that's the, of course, the best and the worst lists between films and games industries. Well, at least I'll talk about films first, because that will be the most simplest things to do, at least when it comes to 2010 all the way up to 2019. So, you know, with the 2010s era, get it? The only films there will not count on that particular era, which is of course The Princess and the Frog, because that film did technically came out during about a decade ago right now. I mean, Jesus Louise, I can't believe that film has been out for a long time now. And also we got ourselves a star from the actual, you know, my profile, which is pretty cool. And hopefully we'll get some more by the time for the sake of the forms of Luigi's Blue World itself. So hopefully we'll get a chance from here. So, anywho though, as well as everything else though, aside from, well, Up, because Up did came out in 2009, mind you, as well as, I think that's about it basically, when it comes to like certain films only came out in 2009. Well, generally speaking, since we lived in UK, that it wasn't until in 2010 we get The Princess and the Frog film that came out in 2010 in UK. But that doesn't technically count as in the forms of the top 10, the actual 2010s era per se, because obviously Tangled did manage to came out in 2010s instead of The Princess and the Frog and stuff like that. So, but you know, you guys totally get the idea about the solution about this here, because I know for the fact that usually UK's back then managed to got the actual films a little bit later compared to the American countries and stuff like that, which is understandable per se, because obviously because of the developers. So, I guess we probably should talk about the forms of the top 10 worst films in 2010 so far, as well as the forms of the best films that we've seen in 2010. To be honest with you, I've not seen that much films back in 2010 per se. because I'm more into the forms of gaming stuff in general, such as like, well, of course, the best games out there in 2010, which is of course Super Mario Galaxy 2, but we'll get to that a bit in a moment temporarily until later on. So even then, of course, it's pretty obvious at this point is the fact that, well, there are quite a few films I usually enjoy watching through, such as, well, for instance, Toy Story 3 is the best one of all the actual 2010 films, bar none. As well as from that, I actually do still enjoy, I don't know what you would call it per se, because I know for the fact there's been so many films came out during 2010. Oh yeah, Tangled. Tangled is a very good one as well. At least I'll admit it though right away. It's a good thing that the Tangled world exist in during Kingdom Hearts 3, which I was like pretty excited for it and also hyped for it at the same time. Despite the fact that in the United Kingdom version that particular film came out in 2011 instead. Which, ironically, it came out the exactly the same year for, you know, specifically the UK country. It did manage to came out in the exact same year as Winnie the Pooh 2011. So, for those of you watching this on Chinese or something like that, when I mention that name, well, it'll become unwatchable for say the least. So, even then, because, well, I just want to point things out because of, you know how Winnie the Pooh was actually, like, fun for every single country, all except China, because obviously China managed to ban, you know, Winnie the Pooh and stuff. And I think that could be also the same applies for South Park or something. I don't know. I just got lost track with myself about the actual, you know, recording data, especially noticeable with informations and all that stuff. So it's hard to able to pick the actual top 10 for the most part, from my experience on films department. Well, usually I've already mentioned about this before. Two good ones actually, which there were obviously Tangled and my favorite film in 2010, which is of course Toy Story 3. And there are some pretty questionably bad ones, such as really? Is that all you have to place your balloon there? Okay then, I guess we'll give this one a go then. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to stand right there, or we can able to use Cappy to toss it, and that's it. Oh, what is going on with the challenge with hiding the actual balloons to begin with, Mr. Japanese person? Anyways, though, yeah, that place the exact same place here. Anyway, let's do a different one, shall we? So that way we don't have to stuck with the most pretty easy place to spot in for, you know, just trying to get the balloon in the process. But anyway, so let's keep on moving and stuff like that, so hopefully we get a chance to able to do so. So, oh yeah, and also the forms of the Pokemon the movie 13 that they came out in during 2010 were only in Japan though until a year later that we finally get a chance to get it in during 2011, which is of course Zoroark, Master of Evolutions, which I will say, that's actually a pretty good one, I'll admit it though right away. Sure, there might be some questionable issues, but apart from those side of things though, I still really enjoy it, even to this day, despite the fact that it did first came out in Japan in 2010, and it wasn't until when we finally get the actual film on DVD in June forms of 2011. So that's pretty obvious for that point, thanks to the forms of Universal and stuff like that. So appreciate about that. As well as from that though, there are some bad films, such as for instance in 2010, we've already got two worst films in that particular year, which is to be more specifically Fred the movie, because, well, I'm just not a big fan of Fred films, and second, it might actually ruin the actual, some sort of what YouTube used to be, very, very good from the start. But then later on though, when Fred comes along, then I don't know, I just don't find that enjoyable to me though when it comes to that. And also The Last Airbender, which is garbage by the way, because even then I've heard of it, but I never get a chance to watch it because I've heard from it though, and it really sucks. It's all, honestly, the Airbender is easily one of the worst films that ever came out in 2010 because of lame special effects and, well, just basically everything else on that film just really makes it much more of a disaster. So, but apart from that though, yeah, 2010 is actually a pretty good year for films departments. Well, there's so much I can usually think of, but there's so much I can able to gather evidence and all that stuff. But the problem is though, is the fact that I have not watched any new singular films during 2010 apart from Toy Story 3, as I mentioned earlier. Now, as far as games department, though, obviously my favorite will have to be by the forms of, I would say, the top 10 favorite games in 2010, which there are. Obviously, number 1 goes to Super Mario Galaxy 2, because it's a sequel to one of my favorite Wii games of all time. And, also, Sonic Colors is actually a very great game for a very long time for Sonic fans, especially after the dark age of Sonic, after the actual... Well, I don't mind Sonic Unleashed, apart from the actual Werehog and gameplay style, and also the same applies for, specifically Sonic and the Black Knight, despite what the actual wackiness is actually involved, and obviously with Sonic 06. Well, I don't usually call it the worst game I've ever played, but it certainly still is a pretty miserable 3D Sonic game to ever came out for about 13 years now, which I can't believe that game has been out for about 13 years time, so... And, also, what sort of other games I do enjoy in 2010? To be honest though, there's not much else I could really talk about, apart from... Well, there is obviously the newest big thing back in 2010, which is of course Kinect for the Xbox 360, and despite I was originally trying to get that back in the day, but after realizing and such, it might actually only be playable during the downstairs living room, which I would say, using it upstairs might be very much a bad idea, because otherwise though, it would crack up the ceilings on the actual... the bottom floor, and also because of this though, you're going to be hearing a lot of loud noises every time you hear the actual thumping noises and all that stuff, which it might not be the actual suitable thing, at least from my experience anyway, and I think that's as far as we can go for this point. So even then though, because I'm probably not going to get Xbox 360 Kinect for a very, very long time, because, well, it's cool for a concept, and aesthetically speaking, it's okay at best, but it's just with the forms of, well, for first-party games, it's not too bad, but for third-party support, it's pretty much, well, dead on not that great. Like, for instance, I was expecting to play through the third installment of the Sonic Riders game, which is of course Sonic 3 Riders, but because of the forms of the critics is actually up, they're just saying about the fact that this is easily the most, unplayable Sonic games they ever played, which I sort of agree, because, well, I was expecting to able to play this on HD for a Sonic Riders game for the first time, but they completely screwed it up because of the actual controls, because you have to utilize the Kinect rather than the actual controller itself. To be honest with you, please bring the actual port over to the newer consoles like Nintendo Switch or PlayStation 4. At least I can able to control the actual character at the right moment, but not something like as useless as those stupid Kinect cameras, which I will say this matter right now. I much rather prefer playing games with the actual controller. Well, I don't mind the Wii Remote, as well as the Wii U gamepad, because it does manage to utilize the motion controls from time to time. At least I'll take the Wii Remote and the other stuff any day, and also the Joy-Cons as well, mind you, any day, in comparison to the forms of Kinect, especially notable with, I wouldn't mind the PlayStation Move, despite I have not got one of these, but... Still, can't deny by that, and plus I might be actually saving money for, specifically the near future until when the next Nintendo Direct comes. So, and speaking of Nintendo Directs actually, is the fact that, you remember when we said this before, back in September or something, perhaps notably when, Duffy has already mentioned about this, is that we're probably not going to have any sort of Nintendo Direct announcements for quite a long while until the new year starts, which I think is understandably true. Because, obviously, because of how the fact that it always stops at, September in each and every single, the actual Nintendo Switch era, when it comes to the forms of the actual Nintendo Directs and all this considered, because, let me retry that. Yeah, if you retry that, you always have to be forced to pay through, a lot of coins, essentially, which I think is actually 100 or 50 or something, so, it's actually not that bad of a price, though, that's what I'm pointing out, so... And also, the 3DS managed to come in 2010, which is a pretty big deal, because it's basically more likely the next installment of the Nintendo DS era family of systems. Although the biggest element to this, though, is of course 3D effects, which I would say it is pretty cool, but every now and then, though, is the fact that nobody else seems able to use the 3DS that often, or the actual 3D effect at all so far, because, well... I'm pretty sure it's pretty good in some games, like for instance The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, that's one obvious thing, and second is Super Mario 3D Land, and even some 3D racing action on Mario Kart 7, whilst in some other games though, specifically Mario Party Star Rush and Mario Party The Top 100, and even especially noticeable with certain game remakes, like Mario Luigi, well, I'll get to those in any second, so, but basically with, you know, the Mario Party games, well, at least in Mario Party Island Tour, at least you're able to actually get some 3D elements to it. But when it comes to Star Rush, as well as, you know, the Top 100, they all simply use it as interfaces, which I would say it might be a little more of a downhill in comparison to the early days of the 3DS has to offer. Well, at least in some degrement. So even then though, speaking of other 3DS software, specifically for those direct ports, or remakes I should say, for two Mario Luigi games, specifically the first one and the third one, for some reason they skipped over the second one, which I have no idea why they just decided able to, you know, lacking with the forms of marketing campaign for the actual sequel, or the second game's remake, but I just don't understand why. Anyway, when it comes to those two games, however, though, they seem to be a little bit lacking when it comes to 3D effects, which I think that could be also same applies for certain games as well, such as WarioWare Gold, because it's pretty obvious because it utilizes the bottom screen for the majority of the time for micro games and stuff like that. And also same applies for Hey Pikmin, because it's the same thing. And also not to mention is the fact that any forms of specifically certain ports, like I would say specifically, actually I really don't know, because even then there are so many 3DS games that sometimes usually supports 3D, while some other times though it doesn't seem like it. So even then though, like Detective Pikachu is another one of those 3DS games that doesn't seem to utilize 3D effect at all, which is kind of a shame, because even then though, I would appreciate it if that's going to be the case though, or maybe I'm wrong, but even then we'll point things out whenever we're able to research on that stuff. And also the big deal for, you know, 2010 era, which I think it was actually the PlayStation Move. I mentioned this earlier ago, but since I still don't have one of these, as I mentioned this before, but it did manage to able to try to compete in with the actual competition with Nintendo and stuff like that. I think they first time ever compete, well, for Sony and Nintendo to compete against each other was actually back in 2004, where basically in, I think it was like in E3 or something like that, according to some rumors or something like that, that at least they did manage to able to, well, reveal the Nintendo DS back in 2004 or something like that. And then later on in exactly the same year, PlayStation might get themselves a biggest competition between, you know, Nintendo DS and PSP from Sony's department. And obviously the biggest difference between the two is the fact that obviously DS managed to have dual screens, whilst the forms of the PSP does manage to have itself just a singular screen, and it's also because it has a lot of some sort of like a different graphical engine in comparison to the forms of Nintendo DS. Well, despite the fact that DS itself sold very, very damn good back in the day compared to the PSP, well, nothing to be horrible about it on the PSP though, because I still quite enjoy it, despite with the amount of small amount of games I've got, specifically, well, obviously Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep and stuff like that. And speaking of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, actually, is the fact that I really do enjoy it back in the day, despite with the amount of loading times and stuff like that can usually drag on for a moment, as well as the forms of some small analog stick maneuvering, which can be really bothersome on the PSP department. But apart from those side of things, though, I really still enjoyed Birth by Sleep. In fact, it was actually probably my third favorite game in 2010, which you know, that could be honestly, same applies for other games here and there as well during that specific year. Despite, well, you know, the lack of, like, any kind of games I was expecting to get on a 360 hardware, just because, well, usually I don't own the Xbox 360 up until when it gets to a point until, you know, in 2011 I've now finally get a chance to have one. And, even then though, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, another one of those games I seem to be really enjoyed back in 2010, especially noticeable because of how the fact that I managed to own 3 versions on that exactly the same year. Well, it wasn't until in 2014, on the other hand, though, where I managed to grab myself the PS3 version just for trophy support's sake. And also, You know in the 360 version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, that version does manage to include, you know, Banjo-Kazooie in there. Well, despite it was actually a design that is based off from Nuts and Bolts, but at least I could appreciate it able to actually play as Banjo and Kazooie during on the Sonic the Hedgehog game, which it wasn't until in 2018 they managed to able to, or actually in 2009 actually, which was just recently, they bring those two back, but new forms of the Ultimate Fighting game for once. So, pretty big deal though, especially because of how the fact that I still really enjoy Banjo-Kazooie stuff since I was a kid. So, anyways though, so I think that pretty much takes care of as we discuss upon where it comes to the best and the worst aspects on 2010. Well, I've already mentioned quite a few bad things in 2010, mind you. And, yeah, that's all I was to say, because even then though, that's all I can really say about my thoughts of 2010. It's a pretty good beginning, start, any forms of 2010's era, despite some a little bit of a questionable design choices here and there, but I'm not gonna mention about this specifically, because even then though, we just managed to able to, you know, get started with the, you know, specific stuff. So, anyways though, so let's go ahead and purchase some more costumes, specifically, as you can tell, I've now managed to purchase myself the actual center outfit, which could be very good. And also, we did manage to... I think I'm actually going to be a little bit curious just to able to purchase the actual wedding bride based off from Princess Peach's costume from the likes at the end of the game. So I think I might as well do that. So, because again, just trying to show off as many of those costumes as I possibly could. So even then, I could able to appreciate that. So... now, obviously, I'm going to be saving the actual skeleton outfit at the very end of the actual Let's Play itself. So hopefully we get a chance to able to do it from here. Well, apart from this very last costume right here, which appears to be the 8-bit Pixel Mario, which I was expecting to get that, but maybe during another time as well. So, but then again, possibilities were endless, I'm telling you. So, anyways, and also we got ourselves 10 more power moons. Oh, we got some more coins during the forms of 6 members that they managed to able to pop my balloon. I'm guessing they pretty much know exactly where my balloon went, or maybe it's probably because in a different kingdom or something. I don't know. So anyways, we got 910 balloons, so I think we got about 89 of those balloons, the moons rather, to go. So even then though, hopefully we could able to actually just to get some more during the later kingdoms throughout. So how many kingdoms we got left? So we done about 3 so far, so naturally speaking we got about 10 kingdoms to go. So even then, but then again, that when it comes to Cloud Kingdom as well as the Ruined Kingdom, those 2 kingdoms will not count, and same applies to you know, the dark side and the darker side, because these were basically just the actual post-game for the end game sequences. But I digress though. So next up we're going to be hit on to is the Sand Kingdom, but of course I'll do that later on for the sake of like, you know, for the sake of Friday. And then eventually at this point we'll continue doing more of these in journey forms of next week, and for the majority of December obviously. So even then though, speaking of the next costume, well, we've obviously shown off the wedding Mario. Let's go for Bridalville for the actual costume is based off from Princess Peach wedding dress and stuff like that, which I know is a bit goofy looking, but apart from those side of things though, looks pretty strange, kind of thinking about it. And I've noticed there's actually a new store I've got from the actual notification. So, but then again, I'll do that for the majority on Friday though, as I said before. So join me next time on Let's Play Super Mario Odyssey. Here's the fact that we're going to be hit on to the continuation on Luigi's Bloom World, but this time we're going to be exploring onto the Sand Kingdom, so hopefully we can get some more coins and pop some more balloons in the process. So, I wonder how that's going to turn out to be. So anyway, see you guys on Friday. Later, fellas.